Hello, my name is Jennifer Dixon with Thrive Yoga and Wellness. Thank you so much for joining me in today's online tutorial for downward facing dog. Downward facing dog is otherwise known as Adho Muka Svanasana. It is a pose that you'll find in a lot of flow-based classes. Ashtanga Yoga, Hatha, all of the classes have a downward facing dog. The key difference, the way that I'm going to teach you, is based on my Ashtanga Yoga lineage. The Ashtanga Yoga down dog, it looks a little different than an Iyengar downward dog pose perhaps might. It's a little bit more narrow, and I prefer it because it forces the muscles to be engaged, these core muscles to be engaged a little bit more. So for downward facing dog, your feet are generally about hips width distance apart. You can have them a if it feels good for your back. There's no yoga police that are going to come and get you or anything like that. But I like to have my feet about hips width distance apart because it's an easy transition from upward facing dog, which we'll do in another video. So for downward facing dog, your hands are pressing flat into the mat and your heels are reaching for the mat. They may or may not touch the mat, but a little yoga secret is you can take a step forward and try to get those heels into the mat. There's a nice energetic exchange from your foot, that prana from the earth coming up into your body. So your knees are not locked out. In fact, when I lock my knees, I tend to go ahead and collapse the chest, which disengages all of the abdominal muscles. So don't lock your knees. Keep them safe. Keep that belly in. Now, I've seen a lot of cues online about this tailbone up, but when I personally don't like that, and I've never been taught this tailbone out, because what happens when you bring the tailbone up towards the sky, it makes the rib cage naturally want to jut out, and then you're not really able to keep the belly in as well, and it disengages your lats, your shoulder muscles. So I like to think about keeping that tailbone tucked ever so slightly, keeping the belly button in, and if you notice, I went from concaving my back to a slight rounding of the back. Your gaze in yoga, in a downward facing dog, is technically, it's called Nabi Drishti. That's towards your belly button. But sometimes that can be funky on the neck. So if you want to just look in between the legs, that's okay too. Press down into your hands, a lot of pressure into the thumb and the pointer finger. I have been taught, and I've seen recently where there's a school of thought where it's allowing a lot of space here between your thumb and your pointer finger to come up off the mat. When you do that, it puts a whole bunch of pressure on the outsides of your wrist. And let's just think about if your hands were your feet, do you have all of your weight on the outside of that ankle? No, if you did, you would turn your ankle all the time. So you try to evenly distribute the weight along your hands just like you would with your foot. So this is like the ball of your foot. You're pressing the ball of your foot, the ball of your hand, into the mat. So really cementing down the thumb and the pointer finger. That's going to create a whole wrist so they don't get stressed. A lot of injuries occur in yoga on the wrist because people collapse out and they create a lot of space underneath the thumb and the pointer. If you keep that thumb and pointer finger pushing down, that's going to help to save your wrist long term. Now think about belly's in again, chest is the rib cages are knitting in, and now think about shoulders away from the ears. I have seen some tutorials about shoulders close to the ears. I'm not the anatomy expert. I've always been taught press the mat away and shoulders away from the ears, and that helps to engage these shoulder muscles. These are the lats all the way to the triceps and the entire shoulder girdle. Pressing that mat away instead of dumping in. So here we disengage and dump. That can actually lead to tears along the shoulders. So if you rotate those shoulders away from the ears, really focus on the outsides of your arms, making them nice and strong. Pointer fingers and thumbs pressing into the mat. Your arms are working here. Your belly is working here. There's a slight roundness in the spine. That's okay. In other forms and other lineages, you might see a downward facing dog that's wider and more like this. I have never been taught that. I'm also an Ashtanga person, not a Iyengar. But for me, I can't keep my belly engaged. I can't keep my quads engaged. I can't keep my muscles engaged when I'm this wide. When I have a shorter stance, I can keep my belly in, I can keep those biceps and triceps working, and the chest and the rib cages are knitted in. This makes it much easier to do things like jump forward softly. When you have a really long stance, it makes it more difficult to do that. Down dog is a challenging position. It's supposed to be a resting position, but if you think about all the muscles that are engaged in keeping you there and they're still trying to stretch at the same time, it still can be a very challenging position. So definitely don't give up. Keep practicing. And my biggest cue for my students is to take out your smartphone and record yourself during your practice. That's hands down the best way for you to figure out what you're doing if you don't have a teacher right there with you, watching over you every step of the way. Thank you so much for joining me in today's tutorial on Adho Muka Svanasana, downward facing dog. I hope you had fun and maybe learned something new. Go in peace. Namaste.